Martin John Bryant is an Australian man who committed the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania, Australia, between April 28 and 29, 1996. This tragic event resulted in the deaths of 35 people and the injury of 23 others, making it one of the deadliest mass shootings in Australian history. Bryant, who was 28 years old at the time, was arrested, charged, and later convicted of multiple offenses, including murder. In November 1996, he pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 35 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at Risdon Prison in Tasmania. The Port Arthur massacre had a significant impact on Australia and led to changes in the country's gun control laws. Following the tragedy, Australia implemented strict measures, such as banning semi-automatic rifles and shotguns, and initiating a nationwide gun buyback program. These actions are credited with contributing to a significant decrease in gun-related violence in Australia. Good day, and welcome back to Crime in Prison. Today, we're looking at the story of Martin Bryant, who might be considered clinically insane. This means they have a mental condition that affects their thoughts and behavior in a serious way. By the way, Crime in Prison is a collection of narratives that delve into the world of crime, punishment, and redemption. From tales of daring heists to accounts of life behind bars, these stories provide a glimpse into the darker aspects of human behavior and the consequences that follow. And the best way to support me is by subscribing to the channel, so if you want to see more stories like this, please hit subscribe now. Let's get right down to it. Martin Bryant was born on May 7, 1967, in Tasmania, Australia. He faced many challenges and difficulties during his childhood. Some reports say that Bryant had a tough upbringing. He was often alone and found it hard to make friends. He also had trouble with learning, which made things even more challenging. Because of these difficulties, Bryant may have felt isolated and lonely during his early years. Bryant's family life was also complex. His father, Maurice Bryant, died by suicide when Martin was only 6 months old. After his father's death, his mother, Carleen Bryant, raised him as a single parent. Carleen was overprotective of Martin, and their relationship was reportedly very close, with her often shielding him from the outside world. Despite these challenges, Bryant was known to have a keen interest in firearms from a young age. His fascination with guns would later become a significant factor in the events that unfolded during the Port Arthur massacre. It's important to understand that although Bryant had a difficult childhood and behavioral issues, these factors don't excuse or justify his criminal actions. The reasons behind his actions are complicated and involve many factors, including his upbringing, mental health, and other circumstances. In early 1987, when Bryant was 19 years old, he met Helen Mary Elizabeth Harvey, who was 54 years old. Helen was a wealthy woman, inheriting a share of the Tattersall's lottery fortune. Bryant was looking for new customers for his lawn mowing service when he met Helen. She lived with her mother, Hilza, in a neglected mansion in Newtown. Helen befriended Bryant, and he started visiting her regularly. He helped with tasks around the mansion, such as feeding the 14 dogs inside the house and the 40 cats in the garage. Bryant became an important part of their lives. In June 1990, someone reported Helen and her mother to the health authorities. When medics arrived, they found both women in urgent need of medical attention. Helen had infected ulcers, and Hilza had a fractured hip. Hilza was moved to a nursing home, but sadly, she passed away several weeks later at the age of 79. This event marked a significant change in Bryant's life, as he had formed a strong bond with Helen and her family during his time at their mansion. After a mandatory cleanup order was issued for the deteriorating mansion, Bryant's father took long service leave to help clean the inside. The local RSPCA had to remove many animals from the house due to poor conditions. Following the cleanup, Harvey asked Bryant to live with her in the mansion. They began spending a lot of money, buying more than 30 new cars in less than 3 years. The two friends spent most of their days together, shopping extravagantly and eating lunch at a local restaurant. Around this time, Bryant underwent a reassessment for his pension. A note attached to the paperwork stated, Father protects him from any occasion which might upset him as he continually threatens violence. Martin tells me he would like to go around shooting people. It would be unsafe to allow Martin out of his parents' control. In 1991, because they couldn't keep animals at their house anymore, Harvey and Bryant moved to a farm called Torresville in Copping, a small town. The farm was 29 hectares, 72 acres, big, and Harvey had bought it. Neighbors remembered that Bryant always had an air gun with him. He would often shoot at tourists who stopped to buy apples at a stall on the highway. At night, he would roam around nearby properties and shoot at dogs that barked at him. Despite his attempts to befriend them, neighbors avoided him as much as possible. On October 20th, 1992, Harvey, aged 59, died in a car accident. 2 of her dogs also died in the crash. Her car crossed onto the wrong side of the road and hit another car head-on. Bryant was in the car at the time and was seriously injured. He spent 7 months in the hospital with severe neck and back injuries. Police briefly looked into Bryant's role in the accident. Harvey had a habit of telling people that Bryant would grab the steering wheel, and she had been in 3 accidents before. She told a neighbor once that one of these days the little bastard, Bryant, is going to kill me. Bryant was the only person named in Harvey's will and inherited over $550,000 Australian dollar worth of assets. Since Bryant didn't understand much about money matters, his mother applied for and got a guardianship order. This meant that Bryant's assets were managed by public trustees because evidence showed he had trouble understanding financial matters. After Harvey's death, Bryant's father, Maurice Bryant, took care of the farm in Copping. Bryant went back to his family's home to recover after leaving the hospital. Maurice, struggling with depression, quietly transferred their joint bank account and utilities into his wife's name. 2 months later, on August 14, 1993, a visitor looking for Maurice found a note on the door of the Copping property instructing them to call the police. They also found several $1,000s in Maurice's car. The rates officer didn't suspect anything criminal, but letters sent to the local council chambers raised concerns. Police searched for Maurice but couldn't find him. They even used divers to search the 4 dams on the property. On August 16th, his body was found in the dam closest to the farmhouse. He had a diving weight belt around his neck. Police said it was an unnatural death and ruled it a suicide. Bryant inherited $250,000 Australian dollars from his father's superannuation fund. Bryant later sold the Copping farm for $143,000 Australian dollars, but kept the Newtown mansion. His clothing style changed after moving back to Newtown. He dressed in a way that reflected Harvey's wealth. Now alone, Bryant's fashion became more eccentric. He often wore a gray linen suit, cravat, lizard skin shoes, and a Panama hat during the day, claiming to have a high-paying business career. He would sometimes wear an electric blue suit with flared trousers and a ruffled shirt to the restaurant he frequented. The restaurant owner remembered people laughing at him and felt sorry for him, realizing he didn't have any real friends. After losing both his father and Harvey, Bryant found himself increasingly isolated and lonely. From 1993 to late 1995, he traveled overseas 14 times, and his domestic airline travel filled 3 pages of summary. Despite being surrounded by people during his travels, Bryant still felt lonely, both abroad and back home in Tasmania. He enjoyed the flights because he could talk to the people sitting next to him, who had no choice but to be polite. He took pleasure in recounting conversations he had with fellow passengers. However, Bryant's loneliness grew, and he eventually became suicidal, feeling like more people were against him. Despite trying to be friendly, he felt rejected. His alcohol consumption increased during this time, although he hadn't drunk any alcohol on the day of the Port Arthur massacre. In the 6 months leading up to the event, he drank heavily, consuming about half a bottle of Sambuca and a bottle of Bailey's Irish Cream daily, along with port wine and other sweet alcoholic drinks. Bryant later recalled that the idea for the Port Arthur massacre might have come to him 4 to 12 weeks before it happened. Bryant has given different and unclear explanations of why he carried out the attack at Port Arthur on April 28, 1996, where 35 people were killed. It suggested that he may have wanted attention, as he reportedly told a neighbor, "I'll do something that will make everyone remember me." Bryant's psychiatrist, Paul Mullen, who was part of his defense team, said that Bryant was influenced by the Dunblane massacre. According to Mullen, Bryant's planning for the attack began after the Dunblane incident. Before the Port Arthur massacre, Bryant had been contemplating suicide. However, the Dunblane massacre and the early portrayal of the killer, Thomas Hamilton, changed his mindset. Bryant's first victims were David and Nolene Martin, who owned the bed and breakfast called Seascape. They had bought the property that Bryant's father had wanted to purchase. Bryant's father had often complained to him about the damage this caused to their family. Bryant believed the Martins bought the property out of spite and blamed them for his father's depression, which led to his suicide. Bryant fatally shot the Martins in their guest house, taking their weapons and property keys before heading to the Port Arthur site. At Port Arthur, Bryant entered the Broad Arrow Cafe carrying a large blue duffel bag. While eating, he tried to start conversations about wasps and the absence of usual Japanese tourists. After finishing his meal, he set up a video camera and took out a semi-automatic rifle. Firing from the hip, he shot patrons and staff. Within 15 seconds, he had fired 17 shots, killing 12 people and injuring 10. He then moved to the other side of the cafe, firing 12 more times, killing 8 people and injuring 2. Bryant changed magazines before fleeing, shooting at people in the car park and from his car as he drove away. 4 people were killed and 6 were injured. After leaving the Port Arthur site, Bryant drove about 300 meters down the road, where he encountered a woman and her 2 children walking. He stopped his car and fired 2 shots, killing the woman and 1 of her children. The other child tried to run away, but Bryant chased and killed her with a single shot. He then stole a gold BMW by killing all 4 of its occupants. A short distance away, Bryant stopped next to a couple in a white Toyota. He drew his weapon and ordered the man into the trunk of the BMW. After locking the trunk, he fired 2 shots into the windshield of the Toyota, killing the female driver. Bryant returned to the guest house where he had killed the Martins. He set the stolen car on fire and took his hostage inside with him. The police arrived and tried to negotiate with Bryant for many hours. However, the phone battery ran out, cutting off communication. Bryant's only demand was to be transported by an army helicopter to an airport. During the negotiations, Bryant killed his hostage. The next morning, 18 hours later, Bryant set fire to the guest house and tried to escape in the chaos. He suffered burns to his back and buttocks but was captured and taken to Royal Hobart Hospital, where he received treatment under heavy guard. Bryant was found fit to stand trial, and his trial was set to begin on November 7, 1996. Initially, he pleaded not guilty, but his court-appointed lawyer, John Avery, convinced him to plead guilty to all charges. 2 weeks later, Judge William Cox of the Hobart Supreme Court sentenced Bryant to 35 life sentences, plus 1,652 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. These sentences are to be served concurrently, and Bryant was given a life sentence for the term of his natural life. For the first 8 months of his imprisonment, Bryant was held in a specially designed cell to prevent suicide, in almost complete solitary confinement. He remained in protective custody for his own safety until November 13, 2006, when he was moved to the Wilfred Lopez Center in Hobart. This is a secure mental health unit run by the Tasmanian Department of Health and Human Services. The unit has 35 beds for inmates with serious mental illnesses and is staffed with medical professionals and support workers. Inmates have freedom of movement within the unit, which is surrounded by a perimeter patrolled by private contract guards. On July 5, 2003, an incident occurred where an inmate sprayed cleaning solution into Bryant's eyes, leading to his transfer to the Royal Hobart Hospital. On March 25, 2007, Bryant attempted suicide by slashing his wrist with a razor blade. 2 days later, he cut his throat with another razor blade and was briefly hospitalized. Currently, Bryant is housed in the maximum security Risdon Prison near Hobart. Thank you for staying with me till the end of the story. What are your thoughts on this entire case? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. If you appreciated our efforts, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so now and stay connected with crime and prison. By subscribing, you'll receive notifications for more compelling stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with another gripping true crime story.